My husband caught me cheating. The evening air felt heavy as I hurried home, my thoughts scattered and my heart racing. Guilt clung to me like a second skin, and I could feel its weight with every step I took. I tried to shake it off, but the memory of earlier that day kept playing in my mind, a mistake, a lapse in judgment that I couldn't take back. It started innocently enough. Daniel, a co-worker, had been my friend for years. We'd shared laughs, stories, and occasional lunches during work hours. But recently, the lines had blurred. Compliments turned into lingering glances, and glances turned into soft touches. I ignored the signs, telling myself it was harmless. I loved my husband, Ryan, or so I thought. Earlier that day, Daniel and I had met at a quiet cafe outside the city. The conversation flowed, his charm pulling me in, and before I knew it, one thing led to another. It was a moment of weakness, one that I regretted the second it was over. When I got home, the house was eerily quiet. Ryan wasn't in the living room where he usually waited for me, nor was he in the kitchen. I called out his name, but there was no response. My heart sank as I noticed his car keys still on the counter. He was home. Somewhere. I walked upstairs to our bedroom, and that's when I saw him. Ryan was sitting on the edge of the bed, his face pale, and his eyes fixed on the phone in his hand. He looked up as I entered, and the pain in his expression hit me, like a freight train. "I know," he said simply, his voice low and trembling. "Know what?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. But I already knew. He held up his phone, and there it was, proof. A photo of me and Daniel, taken at the cafe. Someone had seen us, snapped the picture, and sent it to Ryan. I felt my knees weaken as I stood there, unable to form words. The room seemed to spin around me, the silence between us deafening. "How could you?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Was I not enough for you? Did you even think about us? About everything we've built together?" Tears streamed down my face as I tried to speak, but all that came out was a choked sob. I wanted to explain, to apologize, to say something, anything, that could make it right. But there was no justification, no excuse for what I had done. Ryan stood up, his eyes filled with anger and betrayal. "I trusted you," he said, his voice rising. "I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me." "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice shaking. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean for this to happen." "A mistake," he repeated, his tone bitter. "You didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. And now what? Do you expect me to just forgive you and pretend like it didn't?" I shook my head, knowing deep down that forgiveness was too much to ask for. The damage was done, and there was no going back. Ryan grabbed his jacket and walked past me, his expression a mix of anger and heartbreak. "I need time to think," he said before slamming the door behind him. As I stood there alone in our empty house, the weight of my actions crushed me. I had betrayed the man who loved me, and now I wasn't sure if I'd ever be able to earn back his trust, or if I even deserved to. The silence that followed Ryan's departure was suffocating. I stood frozen, staring at the door he'd just slammed shut, half hoping he'd come back and half terrified of what would happen if he did. My mind was a whirlwind of regret, shame, and self-loathing. I'd never felt so small. I sank onto the edge of the bed, clutching my head in my hands as the tears came hard and fast. This bed, the one where we had shared countless nights of laughter, whispered dreams, and quiet comfort, now felt alien. It wasn't just a bed that felt different. It was everything. I replayed the day in my head, wondering how I'd let it get this far. What had I been looking for? Excitement? Validation? Something Ryan hadn't been giving me, or something I thought he wasn't giving me. I didn't even know anymore. All I knew was that the weight of my choices was unbearable. The hours crawled by. I called Ryan once, then twice, then a dozen times. Each call went unanswered. His voicemail a cruel reminder of the distance I'd put between us. I sent him texts, pleas for him to come back, to talk, to let me explain, but I knew words couldn't fix this. By the time the sun began to rise, I was still sitting there, my eyes red and swollen, staring at the door as if willing him to walk back through it. But he didn't. The next few days passed in a blur. Ryan didn't come home. I tried reaching out to him, but he avoided me completely. I didn't know where he was staying, and his friends, our friends, kept their lips sealed. It was clear they knew, and the shame of it stung even more. Then, one evening, he finally answered my call. "We need to talk," he said, his voice cold and distant. "Please," I said, my voice cracking. "I've been waiting for this. I'll do anything, to fix this." He sighed heavily. "Meet me at the park." 10 minutes. I barely had time to process his words before I grabbed my coat and keys, practically running out the door. The park was just a few blocks away, a place we used to visit often in the early days of our relationship. It was where we'd shared our first kiss, where he proposed on a snowy winter evening under the lights of the old gazebo. When I arrived, I saw him sitting on a bench near the lake, his shoulders slumped and his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. He looked tired, more tired than I'd ever seen him. I approached cautiously, unsure if I should sit down or stay standing. He glanced up at me, his expression unreadable, and gestured for me to sit. "Ryan, He held up a hand, cutting me off. "Don't. Not yet." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding as he stared out at the water. "I've been thinking a lot," he began. "About us. About what you did. About why you did it." Tears pricked my eyes, but I forced myself to stay silent, letting him speak. "I loved you, you know," he said, his voice soft. "I still do, even though I wish I didn't. You were my world, my partner, my best friend. And you threw it all away for what? A fling? A moment of excitement? Was I really not enough for you?" His words cut deep, and I felt my chest tighten. "You are enough, Ryan. You've always been enough. This wasn't about you. It was about me. I was stupid and selfish, and I didn't think about what I was risking until it was too late." He let out a bitter laugh. "You're right about one thing, it was stupid. But now I'm the one who has to live with the fallout. Do you have any idea how humiliating it was to find out from someone else? To see that picture and wonder how long you've been lying to me?" "It wasn't like that," I said quickly. "It happened once, and I regretted it the second it did. I swear, Ryan, I never meant to hurt you, but you did," he said, his voice breaking. "You hurt me in a way I don't think I can come back from." My breath hitched, and I felt the ground shift beneath me. "Are you saying you don't want to try? That this is it?" He was quiet for a long time, the only sound the soft rustling of the leaves in the breeze. Finally, he turned to look at me, his eyes filled with a pain that mirrored my own. "I don't know," he admitted. "Part of me wants to forgive you, to work through this, and try to rebuild what we had. But another part of me doesn't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again. And without trust, what do we even have?" "I'll do anything to earn your trust back," I said desperately. "I'll go to counseling. I'll cut off all contact with Daniel. Whatever it takes, I'll do it. Just please don't give up on us." He studied me for a moment, his expression softening slightly. "I need time and I need space. This isn't something I can decide overnight." I nodded, though the thought of being apart from him felt unbearable. "Take all the time you need. I'll wait, Ryan. However long it takes, I'll wait." He stood up, his hands stuffed back into his pockets, and looked down at me. "I hope you mean that, because if we have any chance at all, it's going to take a hell of a lot more than words to fix this." As he walked away, I felt a glimmer of hope mixed with an overwhelming sense of loss. I didn't know what the future held for us, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to stop fighting for the man I loved, the man I betrayed but desperately wanted to win back. The days that followed were agonizing. Ryan had asked for space, and I knew I had no right to push him. But the silence, the not knowing where his heart was, or whether he was leaning toward forgiveness or walking away for good, was unbearable. Every minute without him felt like a lifetime. I kept myself busy, trying to take accountability for my actions. I began seeing a therapist, not just for our marriage, but for myself. I needed to understand why I'd allowed things with Daniel to happen. What had been missing in me? What had I been trying to fill? In those sessions, I began to confront hard truths about myself. Truths I'd ignored for far too long. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about how I'd slowly started to let the little cracks in our relationship widen instead of addressing them. I'd felt distant from Ryan for months, but instead of talking to him, I let resentment and insecurity fester. And then, instead of turning to my husband, I'd turned to someone else. I hated myself for it. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after Ryan and I had met at the park, I got a call. It wasn't from Ryan. It was from his sister, Melissa. "Have you heard from him?" she asked, her tone sharp. "No," I said quickly, my chest tightening. "Why? What's wrong?" "He's been staying with me," she said, her words cutting through me like a knife. "But he left this morning and didn't tell me where he was going. I thought maybe he came back to you." Panic flared in my chest. "No, he didn't. Do you think he's okay?" "I don't know," she said, her voice softening. "He's been a mess, to be honest. I've never seen him like this, and I'm worried about him. Look, I'm not calling to attack you. I know you screwed up, but I also know he loves you. If you hear from him, just let me know, okay?" "I will," I promised, my voice trembling. After hanging up, I spent the next several hours in a state of restless worry. I texted Ryan again, asking if he was okay, but there was no response. It wasn't until late that night that I finally heard from him. "Meet me," the text read, followed by the address of a small diner on the outskirts of town. My heart raced as I drove there, the streetlights blurring in my peripheral vision. When I arrived, I saw him sitting in a booth near the window, a cup of coffee in front of him. He looked tired, his hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes. But there was something else in his expression. Determination, maybe. I slid into the seat across from him, unsure of what to say. He looked up at me, his gaze steady, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. "I've been thinking," he finally said, his voice calm but firm. "About us?" I asked hesitantly. "About everything," he said. "About what happened, about how we got here, and about whether we can fix this." I leaned forward, desperate to hear what he was going to say next. "I'm angry," he admitted. I don't know if I've ever been this angry in my life. But underneath all of that, I still love you. And that's what's making this so hard." Tears welled in my eyes as I nodded. "I love you too, Ryan. I always have, and I always will. I know I've hurt you, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But if you're willing to give me a chance, I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." He stared down at his coffee, his hands wrapped around the mug. "I don't know if I'll ever forget what you did, and I don't know if I'll ever trust you the way I used to, but part of me wants to try. For us, for everything we've been through together. I'll earn your trust back," I said, my voice shaking. "Even if it takes years. I'll do the work. I'll prove to you every single day that I'm committed to you, and only you." Ryan looked up at me, his eyes searching mine. "If we do this, it's going to be hard. Harder than anything we've ever faced. Are you ready for that?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I'm ready." He nodded slowly, as if he were still trying to convince himself. "Then let's take it one day at a time. No promises, no guarantees. Just one day at a time." Relief washed over me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't a perfect resolution. It wasn't even a resolution at all, but it was a start. As we sat there in the quiet diner, I realized that rebuilding our relationship would be a long and painful journey. But I was willing to fight for it, to fight for us, because despite everything, Ryan was still the love of my life, and I wasn't ready to let him go. The days turned into weeks, and Ryan and I began the painstaking process of rebuilding what I had broken. True to his word, we took things one day at a time. Some days felt almost normal. We'd share a quiet meal or talk about work like we used to. Other days were harder. I could see the doubt and pain flicker in his eyes whenever something reminded him of what had happened. I started therapy not just for myself, but for us. Ryan agreed to join me after a few weeks. Our first session together was tense, filled with long silences and emotions so raw that it felt like walking through a minefield. The therapist, a calm and patient woman named Dr. Morgan, helped us navigate those silences. "Ryan," she asked gently during one session, "what do you need from her to begin to trust again?" He hesitated, staring at the floor. "I need honesty. Complete, brutal honesty. No more secrets. No more lies. If there's even a hint that she's hiding something, I won't stay." "I understand," I said softly, my voice trembling. "I'll be honest with you about everything. Always." "Words are easy," he replied, his tone guarded. "I need actions. I need to see it." I nodded, knowing he was right. I couldn't just tell him I'd changed. I had to show him. One of the hardest things I had to do was cut Daniel completely out of my life. It wasn't just about ending the affair. It was about making sure there was no trace of him in my world. I blocked his number, deleted his messages, and even requested a transfer to a different department at work to ensure I wouldn't cross paths with him again. It was humiliating to explain to my boss why I needed the transfer, but I didn't care. Ryan was worth it. One evening, after dinner, Ryan brought up something I hadn't expected. "Why did it happen?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm. I froze, the question hitting me like a punch to the gut. "I don't know," I admitted, or at least, I didn't know at first. But I've been trying to figure it out. And I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. I think I was scared. Scared that we were drifting apart. Scared that you didn't see me the way you used to. I felt invisible. And instead of talking to you about it, I looked for validation somewhere else. His jaw tightened, and I could see the hurt in his eyes. "So it's my fault?" "No," I said quickly. "It's not your fault. It was my choice, and it was the wrong one. I should have come to you. I should have told you how I was feeling instead of looking for answers in the wrong place." He was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. "I wish you had. I wish you'd trusted me enough to tell me." "I wish I had too," I said, tears brimming in my eyes. "And I'm sorry, Ryan. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you let me." As the weeks went on, we started finding small moments of connection again. A shared laugh over an old inside joke. A quiet walk in the park where we didn't need to fill the silence with words. Slowly but surely, the walls between us began to come down. One night, months after the affair, I came home to find Ryan in the kitchen, cooking dinner. The sight was so ordinary, yet it made my heart ache with gratitude. "Smells good," I said, leaning against the doorway. He looked up at me, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Thought I'd surprise you." As we sat down to eat, he reached across the table and took my hand in his. It was the first time he'd done that since everything had happened. "I want to believe in us again," he said, his voice steady. "And I think I'm starting to." Tears filled my eyes as I squeezed his hand. "I won't let you down, Ryan. Not again." The road ahead wasn't easy, and I knew it never would be. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. We were broken, but not beyond repair. And as long as we were both willing to fight for each other, I knew we had a chance to build something stronger than we'd ever had before. Sometimes love isn't about being perfect. It's about choosing each other, even when it's hard. And that's exactly what we were doing. Over time, things slowly began to settle. The hurt wasn't gone. Ryan still had moments where the pain resurfaced, but we faced it together. Therapy became a lifeline for us, a place where we could unpack the past and start laying the foundation for the future. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, Ryan turned to me and said, "I still think about it sometimes, but I think I'm starting to forgive you." His words caught me off guard, and tears filled my eyes. "I don't deserve it," I whispered, "but thank you for giving us a chance." He nodded, pulling me close. "I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm trying, because I still love you, and part of me always will." In that moment, I knew we were far from perfect, but we were healing. One day at a time, we were choosing each other, and that was enough. Months passed, and little by little, we found a new rhythm. There were still moments of doubt, moments where Ryan's silence said more than words ever could. But there were also moments of laughter, trust, and connection slowly returning. One evening, as we sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Ryan reached for my hand. "We've come a long way," he said softly. "We have," I replied, my voice steady. He turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of vulnerability and hope. "I'm still scared, but I think we're going to be okay." I squeezed his hand, my heart swelling with gratitude. "We will be, as long as we keep trying." It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was ours, messy, real, and worth fighting for. And that was enough. As time went on, the wounds of the past began to scar over, still visible but no longer raw. Ryan and I worked hard, harder than we ever had before, to rebuild what we had lost. Trust was the hardest part. It wasn't something I could rush or demand. It had to be earned through consistency, honesty, and patience. I made it a point to share everything with him, where I was, who I was with, even the mundane details of my day. Not because he asked, but because I wanted him to feel secure again. Slowly, his guard began to lower, and the wall between us started to crumble. One morning, as we were having coffee, Ryan surprised me with a question. "Why do you think we're still here?" he asked, his voice thoughtful. I looked at him, startled. "Because we love each other, and because we both chose to fight for this." He nodded slowly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I think you're right, but it's more than that. I think we've learned to see each other again, to really see each other, flaws and all." His words struck a chord. He was right. The affair had forced us to confront not only my betrayal, but also the cracks in our relationship that we had ignored for too long. It was painful, but it made us stronger. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching the rain fall outside, Ryan leaned over and kissed my forehead, a gesture so simple yet so profound. "I forgive you," he said quietly, his voice steady. Tears welled in my eyes as I looked at him, unable to speak. I had been waiting for those words for so long, and now that they were here, they felt like a gift I didn't deserve. "I'll never stop trying to be the wife you deserve," I whispered. "And I'll never stop trying to be the husband you need," he replied, his hand tightening around mine. Continue next episode coming soon.